Good afternoon, everyone, and many thanks for the invitation to address you today. Unfortunately, I'm unable to be with you in person there in Westport as I'm in Luxembourg at an EU Council meeting, but I do welcome the opportunity to address the group remotely. I'm acutely conscious of the many developments in aquaculture since the last time I spoke to you in 2020. Equally, I'm conscious of the current challenges everyone in the seafood sector is facing in light of the ongoing crisis with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. My address to you today will be in two broad sections, covering licensing issues firstly, and secondly, supports for the industry. To deal with licensing issues first, I'm delighted with the progress that we have made regarding the backlog and the processing of license applications, which was the main concern of operators in recent years. I do not wish to go back over that old ground, but as we all know, the backlog developed following a negative judgment by the European Court of Justice against Ireland, which was in 2007. And that was for breaches of the Birds and Habitats Directives. In the negotiations to address the ECJ judgment and to enable aquaculture to continue in Natura 2000 areas in the interim, a process was agreed with the EU Commission to address the judgment but keep the industry functioning while it was being implemented. Essentially, all bays with significant aquaculture have now been appropriately assessed, with appropriate assessment reports completed for 37 bays. Some bays are indeed on their second updated appropriate assessment at this stage. The process of updating reports as new aquaculture license applications are received for Natura 2000 areas is an essential part of the licensing process before determinations are made. Aquaculture sites and bays which are adjacent or proximate to Natura 2000 areas are also subject to screenings which assess any likely interactions with Natura features and consider the likelihood of disturbing impacts from aquaculture activities on the relevant Natura sites. Natura screening reports have been received now by my department from the Marine Institute in respect of 19 bays around the coast. Again, a number of these screening reports have been or are in the process of being updated to reflect the new aquaculture license applications which have been received by the department following the completion of earlier assessments. I'm very aware of the time-consuming nature of the production of these assessments by the Marine Institute and also of the input needed from Bord Iascaigh Mhara, for which I'm grateful. Despite the difficulties presented by COVID-19, my department has continued to process license applications, and I'm confident that the shellfish industry is on a course for a productive and prosperous post-COVID future. Due to the progress we've made in licensing, the shellfish and seaweed applications currently being processed are in the main new applications, bar a number of legacy issues. The work undertaken by my department has not only effectively eliminated now the shellfish licensing backlog, thankfully, but has also had the effect of stimulating interest and activity in shellfish and seaweed aquaculture as well. This is evidenced by the significant increase we're seeing in new license applications over the past 2 years. That increase in license applications is a very positive development in terms of business activity within the industry. It also provides evidence that the industry is embracing and attracting new entrants, which is really essential, as we know, for the future of the sector and industry. Despite the difficulties presented by the COVID-19 challenge, and indeed recently by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I am confident the aquaculture industry is on course for a productive and prosperous time ahead. To touch on seaweed policy, the Irish Macroalgal cultivation strategy from 2021 to 2030 is currently at draft final stage, and the final consultation with the 38 identified stakeholders was completed recently. In addition, an extensive review of literature of relevance to the sector, for example, including market reports, EU and national policies, outputs of recent EU projects too, as well as academic publications, were also carried out to inform the strategy. That strategy sets out a roadmap for the sector over the next EMFAF funding period, with a proposed mid-term review too. The sector can be described as promising, as currently there are 25 licensed producers covering 254 hectares, with 13 applications covering 522 hectares currently with my department. Significant opportunities arise for the industry to increase production, depending on the species and the growing technique utilised. In addition, I'm advised by BIM that it is envisaged that further sites could come on stream, including the possibility of co-location of seaweed with offshore wind energy to increase the production opportunity too. Norway, Belgium, Netherlands, and Germany have expansive plans to grow production in the period up to 2030, in particular using offshore energy installations for seaweed farming. This is largely focused on supply of seaweed for biofuels to reduce dependence on fossil fuels. The Irish macroalgal cultivation strategy identifies a range of actions which fall under three pillars, those three being firstly, building and sustaining the sector, then secondly, establishing and growing the market, and thirdly, securing and safeguarding its future. And critical to the development of the sector and identified in the strategy is the need for a commercial seaweed hatchery or hatcheries, innovation and product development, automation and industrialization to allow for scale production, brand development and improve public awareness, as well as market intelligence, financial support and investor confidence, and also an effective national research and innovation agenda. These identified needs will fall within the remit of a number of state agencies and research performing organisations. The EU Commission has a concept of a strong and robust EU algal sector, recognising the need for Europe to develop the opportunity. In particular, the EU Commission is conscious of the dominance of the Asia-Pacific region at the moment in algal production. Under the Farm to Fork strategy at EU level, the EU algae initiative is to be adopted during this year, actually. Its aims, among others, is to increase sustainable algae production and also to address regulatory obstacles in member states. I'm hopeful that these opportunities will be embraced by the sector here. To touch on licensing issues as well, in particular with regard to finfish, the department currently has 37 pending marine finfish aquaculture license applications on hand. And this includes both new and renewal applications. The processing of these applications is, however, significantly more complex than shellfish applications, not least due to the requirement that the application be accompanied by an environmental impact statement, or in the case of applications received after the 16th of May in 2017, an environmental impact assessment report. This requirement is set out in national as well as EU legislation. Following a number of extensions, I'm pleased to report that all operators submitted an EIS or EIAR documentation by the final deadline of the 30th of June 2021. I understand that in a number of cases, further information and documentation is required, and my officials are engaging with operators regarding any outstanding information now required with a view to progressing these applications, and also resolving the backlog in finfish license applications too. Once the necessary information is received and the required technical and scientific reviews have been finished, these applications will progress to public and statutory consultations in accordance with the requirements of the relevant legislation. I also must mention the independent aquaculture licensing review. The number one priority for the industry was to eliminate the backlog of aquaculture license applications, and the department set that as the primary focus and objective. In relation to updating the aquaculture legislation, a number of ongoing legal cases will also inform those updates as we go forward. A further recommendation of the review was to develop an online system. And Aquamis, the Aquaculture Management Information System, aims to develop a data management and a data information system with online aquaculture license application and tracking functionality, and also with spatial mapping functionality of aquaculture sites and exclusion areas. This has been developed in collaboration with the Marine Institute, with funding too being provided from the EMFF. I'm anticipating launching phase one of Aquamis in May, and this will allow applicants and the public to view licensed aquaculture sites and mapping information through a public portal, which I know will be very welcome. The implementation of the licensing review group report forms a really important part of the current programme for government, and my department is now well advanced in preparing an implementation programme for the report's remaining recommendations, and it's a key priority for me. I'd like also to again refer briefly to an issue that my department has raised repeatedly with IFA Aquaculture, and I've raised with you too myself, and that is the importance of public perceptions in relation to the industry. Negative public perceptions and lack of understanding of the relevant science in respective aquaculture operations can fuel objections to license applications, as we know. This is evident in a number of legal cases and challenges that have been taken in respect of license applications. Public consultation is a really important part of our licensing framework, and enabling public participation is an important part of our social fabric too. Publication of industry-level information in respect to the relevant protocols that industry adheres to is an important step in enabling enhanced transparency right across the industry, and this is something that my department will discuss with industry in the coming months. In February, I announced the establishment of the Common Fisheries Policy Review Group, involving stakeholders, including the aquaculture industry, producer organisations, National Inshore Fisheries Forum, as well as co-ops and the seafood processing sector. It also includes representatives of environmental NGOs, and its purpose is to examine the issues that arise for Ireland in the context of the Common Fisheries Policy Review, and to advise me on priorities for the negotiations, and indeed to identify strategies most likely to influence the outcome and a positive outcome of the review. I have asked the group to focus recommendations on supporting the social and economic health of our fisheries-dependent coastal communities, the economic development of our seafood sector, and also to focus on delivering long-term sustainability of fish stocks and maximising protection of habitats and the marine environment. I very much welcome the input of your representatives on this group, and thank all in IFA Aquaculture for their positive engagement in the group so far. Another area of key importance to your industry is the development of the offshore renewable energy sector. The Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage is leading the preparation of a communications protocol between the seafood and offshore renewable energy sectors that will generate an agreed mechanism for communication between the two industries. Constructive engagement needs to have a regular schedule, and it will be essential that there are responsive communications between the seafood and the offshore renewable energy sectors. I expect that the protocol will provide clear and defined guidelines for interactions between the industries with regard to offshore renewable energy developments within the context of the National Marine Planning Framework. And I would hope that the protocol will also focus on the common ground that's there, as well as matters such as safe operations at sea. There are also opportunities for mutually beneficial coexistence between these marine sectors that must be identified and that we must work together to capitalise on. Just to touch as well on industry supports coming out of Brexit and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. I'm very much conscious of the impact on the seafood sector of the significant increases in the price of marine diesel that we've seen, and I've heard directly from representative groups at recent meetings about the impacts of the high fuel prices on the industry, and equally the concern emerging on feed process in the latter half of this year. The government is also very conscious of the impacts of high fuel costs in many other sectors of the economy too. On the 23rd of March, the European Commission published a new temporary crisis framework for state aid measures to support the economy following the aggression that we've seen from Russia through the illegal invasion of Ukraine. The purpose of the temporary crisis framework is to provide clear state aid mechanisms to member states in order to support sectors of their economies impacted by the war in Ukraine, for example, through significantly increased fuel costs. In relation to the seafood sector, member states must limit aid to impacts in 2022 to a maximum of €35,000 per undertaking. Of course, such a scheme has to demonstrate that the aid proposed is proportionate to the impacts on the undertakings concerned and is most relevant to member states planning nationally funded aid schemes. Separately, too, on the 25th of March, the European Commission adopted a decision activating Article 26 of the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund regulation, which facilitates member states in using, if they decide to, this article as a basis to make available compensation on the European Maritime Fisheries and Aquaculture Fund programs to operators for their income foregone or additional costs related to the Ukraine war. Alternatively, as well, aid can be provided to producer organisations for storage aid, for market support mechanisms that aid the freezing and cold storage of fish in periods of market turbulence, and also its subsequent release to the market when matters improve. The Commission has stated that it is also examining a possible legislative proposal for an amendment of the EMFF to facilitate member states in using remaining funds in their 2014 to 2020 programme period for the same purpose. I'm awaiting details of the proposed EMFF amendment, and we'll be considering that then when considering the situation then after that with full regard to the trends in market prices for marine diesel. In relation to the Department's new seafood development programme for the 2021 to 27 period, I'm pleased to be able to advise that the strategic environmental assessment process required by law is now underway, with the contractor having been recently appointed following an unsuccessful tender process, unfortunately, last year. The consultants are targeting completion of their work by June of this year, and I anticipate a public consultation process over the May to June period, and expect to bring the new programme to government then in July. In relation to the recommendations of the Seafood Sector Task Force, of which IFA Aquaculture was a member, and again, thanks for your involvement in that, a possible capital support scheme for the aquaculture sector has been drafted in line with the recommendations of the task force, and that's presently with the European Commission for state aid consideration. If that's cleared by the Commission, the scheme would be funded under the Brexit Adjustment Reserve. So I'll continue to keep you up to speed on that too. So listen, to conclude, once again, I'd like to thank IFA Aquaculture for the invitation to join you today. I'd also like to recognise and thank the organisation for your input into both the Seafood Task Force and also the current Common Fisheries Policy Review Group. And I wish you very well with the proceedings this afternoon. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in Westport today. And unfortunately clashed with the monthly EU Council meeting in Luxembourg. And I've just come yesterday as well from a meeting in Paris where I met with the French Marine Minister, who's currently holds the presidency of the EU Council as well, for a discussion in relation to the upcoming review of the Common Fisheries Policy, and indeed the upcoming review as well of the 10-year access agreement. So I look forward to engaging with you further. Once again, thanks for the tremendous work that all of you have done over the last year. Thanks for the tremendous contribution you make to our economy, and particularly to small rural economies in which you work and which you're really, really important. It's been great to see, thankfully, the licensing issues begin to be significantly resolved over the last period of time and get into a much better place now. And I look forward to working with all of you to continue to develop the aquaculture sector nationally and really see it deliver on its potential for all of you in terms of income and livelihoods, and also importantly through that to the rural economy and our national economy too. So thank you. Best wishes for the weekend, or best wishes for the event and the conference. And I hope you all get to enjoy Westport in the process as well. It's a great place to be, and sorry I couldn't be with you today. Thanks very much indeed.